Delighted to welcome Claudine and Suzanne this evening. Hello, Claudine and Suzanne. If you want to start turning on your video and unmuting your sound. So before all things COVID-19, we had actually originally planned to host this event at our Malabar Community Library. I'm not sure who would be familiar with it, but it's our small little library down in the suburb of Malabar, and it was going to be our very first author talk there, as it holds a very special place for Suzanne, as she's a patron there. But nevertheless, we are so pleased to be able to deliver an online event with our local and beloved author this evening. I won't say much more about that because Claudine, I'm sure, will have more to say. But I will say that we do have Suzanne's books available to borrow. And we will be pushing out some links about where you can buy your own copy if you wish. If you do want to get a signed copy, there's some instructions in the Eventbrite email that will send to you, and we would be delighted to facilitate that. And because we're now open, you can actually come into the library and pick it up. So if that's something that you would like to treasure, have a signed copy by Suzanne, we can make that happen. I'd also just like to point out that the Deceptions is also available as an audiobook. I've just put a link up to Audible because it's the most direct way to get it. And by all accounts, the narrator is particularly good on this one. So if you like listening to your stories, that's a good pick. And then let me introduce you to Claudine. It seems like a lifetime ago, but I met Claudine following an author talk with Chris Hammer way back in February, such a long time ago. He approached me to inquire if we could collaborate in some way, as talking to and promoting authors, particularly Australian authors, is a passion of hers. If you like listening to podcasts and discovering new Aussie authors, you should subscribe to Claudine's Talking Aussie Books, which is available to listen wherever you normally listen to your podcasts. And finally, I'd also like to mention that Claudine is also a writer and is in the process of establishing her own career as an author. And perhaps Claudine, when it's out in the wild, we can have you back and you can run your own author talk. And we can, and Suzanne can hear you. I don't know, it's a full circle. Anyway, so without further ado, you don't need to hear any more from me. I'll hand over to Suzanne and Claudine. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn my video off, and over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for such a warm and welcoming introduction. For my part, I'm delighted to be with you all here tonight. Thanks to Christine and the Randwick Library team for facilitating this wonderful event. And for all of you lovely people out there in Zoom land who we can't see, hello and welcome. Just reiterating what Christine has already said, if you've got a burning question for either Suzanne or indeed myself, don't forget to post those questions on the Q&A facility at the bottom of your screen. Fingers crossed we'll have some time at the end to answer some of them. And if we don't, you can always get in contact with either Suzanne or myself on Facebook or by email, and I'm sure that we would both be happy to answer any questions that you have. Excuse me. So, shining a spotlight on Australian authors and their stories is my passion, as Christine said earlier. This is the reason that I started my podcast in August of 2018. Not only do I love talking to Australian authors, but reading stories with a local connection is particularly exciting. So you'll understand why I jumped at the chance to speak with Suzanne today. Suzanne Leal is an author and a regular interviewer and presents at literary festivals and events, and was a senior judge for the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards between 2017 and 2019. Suzanne is also a lawyer, why we have something in common, and she lives in Sydney with her husband and 4 children. Suzanne's new book, The Deceptions, was published by Allen and Unwin earlier this year. It's a breathtaking story. It's a story that spans 2 time frames, the past and the present. It moves between 2 continents, from Europe to Australia, and it's a story born out of survival, whose shock waves continue to reverberate into the present. It's a harrowing, deeply moving account of the horrors of war and the lies upon which lives can be built and then destroyed. A compelling and compulsive human story I simply couldn't put down. Suzanne, congratulations on the publication of The Deceptions. How exciting for you to see another book baby launched out into the world. How are you feeling about the reception that the book's been getting at the moment?
I've been really pleased, actually, Claudine. It's been a strange time with COVID-19, and the book came out on the 31st of March, which was almost exactly the day the country went into lockdown. But I must say that what it did was to force me in a way online and to force me to become more knowledgeable about what was happening, and also to get to know the online community a bit better. And people have been so filled with goodwill. There's been such support. I've had a lot of messages. You know, it would have been nice to have had bookshops open, but I think online and generally the community has really rallied, I think, behind writers and artists generally. So I've been delighted by that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I know that there are lots of people out there who haven't yet read your book. So for their benefit, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit, tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, thanks, Claudine. So the book for me is essentially the story of Hannah, and Hannah is a Czech Jewish woman who was born before the war, who came to womanhood in the 1930s, 40s, and who finds herself taken to a ghetto outside Prague, which is called Theresienstadt. She's there with her parents. In that ghetto, she finds herself guarded. She does work in the garden, and her guard is a Czech gendarme, which is sort of half police, half military. And he becomes very attracted to her. The story is about the development of what might be called a relationship, might not be called a relationship, and the ramifications of that relationship down the line.
Indeed. Now, this is your third published book, but the second book in which you explore wartime experiences under the Nazi regime. And the first book was Border Street. Can you tell me what inspired those stories?
So look, both stories were inspired by my former landlords and neighbours, Fred and Eva Perger. They made an enormous impression on my life. When I was just out of university, my then partner and I wanted to move to the beach. We went to an open house inspection of a house in Tamarama, which we thought was beyond our budget. As it turned out, the duplex was right side by side to the landlord's, which I think perhaps put people off. In any case, we got it. Fred and Eva Perger lived next door. They were Czech, they were Jewish, they were both Holocaust survivors. What followed was a really important friendship and relationship for me, such that after some years they both spoke to me about their Holocaust experiences, particularly Fred. And Border Street, my first novel, it's fiction, it's a novel, but it's very heavily based on his experiences during the war. The Deceptions comes back to the war. It's not so much based on Fred and Eva, but instead on one particular story they told me.
Yeah, so yeah, tell us a little bit about that story.
It's a story that has never left me. I'm sure you can sympathise with this, Claudine. When you're trying to write a book, you need something that's going to grab you. You need something you're not going to get bored with. You need something that's not going to lose you halfway. And after 10 years, I think at the time, this story still stayed with me. And so this was the story. So Fred and Eva were childhood sweethearts, and they were both sent to the Theresienstadt ghetto outside of Prague, and they went with their families. Eva's father was a doctor, Dr. Fischer, and because he was a doctor, that gave him a place of importance in the ghetto within the Jewish community. That meant he was protected from transports, and so was his family. There was a Czech gendarme. They, if not befriended, at least got to know. He broke his arm. Dr. Fischer offered to set the arm in a cast for him. He was grateful. He offered to do a favour in return, and they asked if he could send letters through the ghetto from Prague, because otherwise correspondence was censored. He did that. Things were going well, but then there was a problem. The gendarme was having what I was told was a relationship with one of the Jewish women, one of the inmates, and that was illegal. There was a Nazi law called Rassenschande, or race shame, which made it an offence for a non-Jewish person to be in an intimate relationship with a Jewish person. Because of that relationship, the gendarme was arrested. Because he was arrested, his notebook was found. Because Dr. Fisher's name was in the notebook, Dr. Fisher was also arrested. And as a result of that, his protection was lost and he was taken to a political prison, and Fred and Eva lost their protection, and they and their families were then sent later on a transport to Auschwitz. The reason the story interested me is that whilst I knew a lot, or something, not much about the gendarme, but I knew who he was in terms of that he was a gendarme in Theresienstadt. I knew what happened to him after the war. I knew nothing about this Jewish woman, nothing at all. And I kept wondering what happened to her. I couldn't find out because I didn't actually have the gendarme's name. I didn't have her name. So there's little actual research to be done. So I thought after a while, perhaps I should just try and write it out. Like, I wasn't sure I could do it. Historical research can be really hard and makes me tired thinking about it. But it was a story that just didn't go away, and it was a story that kept me through the years of writing it.
Indeed. So Hannah Lederover is your protagonist, and she is a fictional character, obviously, but her movements throughout the war mirror the movements of Eva Perger, your neighbour. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So whilst Hannah does not have Eva's personality at all, what she does share with Eva is her journey through Europe as a Holocaust survivor. Yeah. So everywhere that Hannah goes in the course of my novel, Eva had gone there. And I used Eva did an interview with the Steven Spielberg organisation that made video recordings with Holocaust survivors, and also told me about what had happened to her. So I was very careful to make sure that everything that happened to Hannah could have happened in the Holocaust. And in fact, the journey she took mirrored exactly what had happened to Eva.
Amazing. Hannah's survival in this book is nothing short of miraculous, and hence, you know, both Eva and Fred's survival is nothing short of miraculous too. From the ghetto to the camps, through the bitter winters, the death marches and the starvation, she survived, just as Fred and Eva survived. So tell me about your research and how you retraced Eva's steps for Hannah.
I'm not very good spatially, so don't ask me to get somewhere in the car. GPS has been the most exciting development in modern technology for me. So what I needed to do, first of all, was just to have a spatial understanding of where Hannah was to be taken. So I've got an old-fashioned atlas, and sometimes there is just no substitution for paper. You know, I think libraries, and thank you Randwick Council and Randwick Library for this today, but as I understand it, like I can be corrected, paper is still the most reliable form of data retention. And for me, I think sometimes paper just gives you a sense of space that the screen does not. So I've got this big atlas, and I traced with post-it notes and with lines what happened to her. And then I had to go back and find out, because Eva died 12 years ago, and so I couldn't ask Eva anymore, hey, what happened here, as I had been able to with Fred when I was writing Border Street, because he was alive while I was writing it, and alive for the publication. So I had to look elsewhere, and I must say there was a wealth of extraordinary memoirs written about the Holocaust, and that gives you the day-to-day stuff. And I think with this research, what I mostly needed was day-to-day. So what people ate in the ghetto, what food there was in the camp, how long the march was for, what the conditions were, what the work was. Some years ago, I met a woman called Zdenka Fantlova, who wrote a book called The Tin Ring. And she had to some extent a similar trajectory to Eva and then Hannah. So her book was quite useful in confirming information that Eva had given me, and also helping me to imagine the situation and the geographical locations.
Yeah.
That, and one more thing that was terrific for people who are actually doing research in this area, a book called Theresienstadt, H.D. Adler, recently translated from the German, which will save people having to plow through it in German, and that's like an encyclopedia of the ghetto.
Amazing. The thing that I admired most about Hannah was her pragmatism. It's clear that she was broken physically, emotionally, spiritually by what she'd experienced and witnessed throughout her journey. But she was almost always surprised by her capacity to keep moving forward. Thinking about the many that didn't survive that same journey, how much of Hannah's survival do you think came down to luck, and how much of it was her will to survive, do you think?
I used to ask Fred Perger about this, because Fred's story is very different to Eva's and Hannah's, but it also showed remarkable survival skills and just remarkable strength and resilience. He had a very strong will, and I think, and he was young, and he was, even the worst times, I think he was adamant that he was going to survive. I don't know that I would have had that resilience, and I don't know that I would have had that strength. Whether that enabled him to survive, I don't know. I know that there were people he was with who committed suicide in similar circumstances. He would say that there was a lot of luck, extraordinary luck. You know, first of all, being chosen when they stopped at Auschwitz, whether to be sent to the gas chambers or to be sent the other way. Apart from your age, which was sometimes hard to work out, that was very much a question of luck. I think for Hannah, if I was getting inside Hannah's head, what made it easier for her to survive was friendship. I think one of the characters that I draw in the book, The Deceptions, is Eliska, who becomes Hannah's very close friend, and she's an optimistic, hopeful and very kind person, and a group of 5 women, including these 2, make their way through a large part of that Holocaust journey, including a death march. Look, I don't know, because I wasn't there, and I wouldn't want to speak for people whose relatives have been or who had been themselves, but I do wonder whether having friends or having a friendship to guide you through may help that. It certainly helped Fred. Fred had a friend called Honza, who was on the train from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz with him. I sometimes think, and in these COVID times, I sometimes think that intimacy is important, and when we lose intimacy, it can be very difficult.
Indeed. Part of Hannah's survival, I think, or in my opinion, came down in part to these half-truths that she shrouded herself in. She hid her true identity to protect the life that she managed to build herself after the war. But the truth always has a way of coming out, doesn't it?
Not always, but it can. And I think that's the nub of the book. The book is called The Deceptions. It was called The Deceptions for a great part of my writing. So it's a title that I chose and that the publisher, Allen and Unwin, agreed to keep or wanted to keep. And I suppose the question of when you're dealing with a deception is, there is truth being covered. And in The Deceptions, although it's essentially, for me, Hannah's story, it's told from 4 perspectives. So it's Hannah, Carol, the gendarme, Tessa, who is Carol's granddaughter, and Ruth, who is a Uniting Church minister. Yeah. Each of them have a truth that they're hiding, a deception they're keeping, a betrayal they're involved in. And I suppose what I was interested in is the aim in life to be truthful? Is the aim in life to open up questions that have been shrouded in secrets, or is it a bit more complicated than that? Can the aim be to work out what is useful, what is helpful, and is a life led partly in deceit necessarily a bad life?
Yeah, look, I wanted to talk about that a little bit further. I mean, you've got two very interesting characters in the book. You've got Ruth, who is the minister, and then she befriends a fellow in her father's nursing home called Amir. And there is a very interesting discussion about whether the truth is always warranted in all circumstances. And so that I found that a really fascinating aspect of this book. And it made me indeed question whether or not, whether or not the truth is always served by revealing it, or whether it's always warranted, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think this interest in truth has partly come from my career, and you can probably identify with that since it's something we share. As a lawyer, the question of truth is an interesting one. I used to practice criminal law, and of course, what you're looking for is truth, but subject to a whole lot of conditions. So subject to the presumption of innocence, subject to the right to silence. And I wonder sometimes if the question of truth is too easy a question to put. I mean, what is truth? I mean, your truth might not be mine. The way we see something shrouded in darkness might give us a completely different perspective. And your idea of betraying that truth might be very different for someone else whose idea is protection. So I wonder if that, having worked in law, and at the moment I have to work out whether I make decisions. So I have to work out whether a person who comes before me should be given the right to work with children that's previously been refused to them. And to deal with that, I have to look at their history, and I have to try and establish what the truth is. But that's easier said than done. And I think that the truth is a slippery beast.
It's a construct in many ways.
I think that's right, yes.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to talk about Karel for a moment. So he was the Czech gendarme in the ghetto prison that takes a special interest in Hannah, shall we say, and unwittingly puts himself in danger of being sent to the camps by being seen with her. The exploitation and abuse of women during war is a sadly familiar tale. Hannah is undoubtedly a victim of Karel's unwanted attentions. It's wrong on so many levels, and yet I don't think she sees it that way.
I think, and again, I'm taking my cues from the information that Fred and Eva Perger gave me, I think war puts you in positions that you could never imagine yourself to have been in. I think to judge people's behaviour during war is difficult, because I'm not sure how I would behave, and I'm not sure how I would see the behaviour around me. So Karel is really attracted to Hannah because she's a really attractive woman. She's dry, she holds back, she doesn't give him what he wants, which is conversation, which is accolades, and that makes her even more appealing. He is less educated than she is. He's less intellectual, and when I say less educated in terms of formal schooling, he's bright, he's a farmer, he has been a farmer, he's been delighted to be made gendarme, but he can't keep up with her culturally and intellectually, so she's almost like this prize he can't quite get. What he can do, and so he actually, she's the one with the power in terms of two people coming together. Problem is, she's a prisoner and he's a guard, and so the power he does have is the physical power to reprimand her, or the power not to. So when, because she's starving or she's very hungry, she steals vegetables she's supposed to be gathering for the guards or for the Nazis, or for the ghetto as a whole, it's in his power whether to say, I'm going to report you or I'm going to let it go.
Yeah.
So I saw that as him trying to equalize that unequal power that existed between them in terms of personality. But he was a guard and he was in charge, and power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. And I think what I wanted to show a little bit with him is that he did use that. But I think if he were here, if he were not imaginary, he would be surprised to hear that this wasn't a love story. For him, I think his story with Hannah is a love story.
Yeah.
For her, it's not. It's a story of survival. Did he exploit her? I wonder whether she'd even asked the question. I think after the war, she would have just got on with her life. I wonder that perhaps, I don't know how much thought she would have given to him, apart from issues that we'd need to raise with people that have read the book, so I don't spoil anything.
Yeah, no spoilers.
But I don't think that power dynamic is so easy. I don't think it can be tweeted in a couple of characters. Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. So let's move on to the contemporary part of the story. And I loved seeing references to our local area, Maroubra and Centennial Park. More and more Australian authors are embracing the idea of setting their novels in towns and suburbs, places we recognise and are familiar with. Was this something that you specifically considered when you were writing this, or was this a natural consequence of you speaking to Fred and Eva, do you think?
So with this book, The Deceptions, it was clear that I had to situate it in reality, at least for the war. And if I was situating the book in reality for the war, because you have to, because it happened, and I think particularly with Holocaust-based stories, I think one of the imperatives is that what you're writing about in a work of fiction, if it's about the war, if it's about the Holocaust, has to have been possible. It has to have been able to have happened. And I think that gives, I'm hoping, dignity to what had happened, and it gives gravitas to the situation. So, I had Auschwitz, I had Theresienstadt, I had Bergen-Belsen, I had countries where my protagonist goes to afterwards. So when I came to the contemporary towns, which in the past, or at least in The Teacher's Secret, which was my previous book, I didn't name, so I made them up. I thought I couldn't do that. I thought I actually need to situate this in reality in the same way as I have with the wartime material, except for one town where Ruth lives, which is Jarrow, which I made up. I sort of imagined it a bit like Oatley, if there's anyone from Oatley out there.
I think that myself, but I thought I definitely didn't know where Jarrow was, but no, that's fascinating. As someone who hosts a lot of, or who's had a lot of experience in the Australian publishing arena, do you still think there's an element of cultural cringe still hanging around our literary scene? Because, in years gone by, people didn't want to talk about local areas, Randwick or Maroubra, or, even Mossman. We were always outward looking as Australian writers. We were always looking to, talk about or set our stories in places that weren't local to us.
Look, I think for a long time it was very difficult to get published in Australia. I think it was difficult for women as well, and I think in the past the community was in England or was overseas or in America, and so the ambition was to go there. Because I've done a lot of judging of Australian works, that's become my interest. And if I have a very small expertise, it's been in sort of recent Australian books that have been entered for the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards. But it does give you a bit of an idea of what's happening within the industry and with Australian authors. I think it's become pretty sexy to be an Australian author, particularly in the light of the success of people like Chris Hammer for Scrublands. Now, Dervla McTiernan sort of, we can claim her as Australian, but she's also Irish. And so I suppose her books are a little bit different. But Michelle de Kretser, Charlotte Wood, there are a number, Christos Chalkis. I think in the last 20 years, I would say personally that cringe has disappeared a lot, and that we are actually getting more coverage in the UK, for example, and America. I know, for example, my English publisher for The Teacher's Secret is Legend Press, and they have shown a particular interest in looking at Australian literature and bringing Australian authors to their list in the UK. I also think perhaps Australia still has an element of being exotic in terms of landscape. Mm. And I do also think that Aboriginal literature and Indigenous writers have really come to the fore in the last, again, maybe 20 years. I mean, we have extraordinary Indigenous writers who are gaining great acclaim overseas. So we've got Lexis Wright, we've got Kim Scott, we've got Leah Purcell for her scripts. We've got Tara June Wentz now, and there's a number that Tony Birch. So there's a number of Indigenous writers who are gaining that curiosity, I think, and interest, and because of the quality of their work and the perspective they bring to describing Australia. So I think the answer is no to your question.
Terrific. So Suzanne, what would you like most for readers to take away from your novel?
I would like readers to feel like they've been part of my character's world. I'd like readers to feel like they know the characters, that they've followed Hannah through. I'd like to think that there are no pat answers to difficult questions, and I don't want to tell the reader what to think or how to think. I particularly dislike that. I particularly dislike the didactic writer. My aim always with my writing is just say, look at that. Look at this situation. Imagine that. What do you reckon? Yeah. That's what I think I want them to take. I want to say, here it is. I wrote this. What do you reckon?
Pretty damn good. Suzanne, you're a busy professional woman, a mother and a writer. You're involved in lots of literary activities, and in fact, despite us being practically neighbours, I first saw you at a literary festival down on the South Coast sometime last year. So my question to you is, how do you manage to juggle all those balls in the air?
I think partly it's smoke and mirrors. I think that apart from didactic writing, what I don't like is people saying, or women particularly saying to other women, you just got to be a bit more efficient. Because the way I see it, everyone gets 24 hours in a day. Some people have a whole lot of help to get through those 24 hours. Some people don't. But it doesn't matter how efficient you are, you can't stretch the day to more than 24 hours. So, yep, I'm a lawyer, but I don't work full time. And I have a flexible job at the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, which enables me to do a lot of work sometimes and pull back and do less work. So there's that. The kids are getting older. I've got an 8-year-old, and so that's still more work. But there's no way I could have done everything when the kids were really young unless I had babysitters. And I had some really great babysitters. And I need to write, so it's more, I go a bit mad if I don't write, and I get a bit cranky if I don't write, quite cranky if I don't write. And so I need to take that time, and I find that time at the expense of other things, at the expense of friendships. And as you've said, we're really, we're neighbours practically, but we haven't seen each other. And perhaps it's not a coincidence that we're both writers, because I love being with my friends, but I love being with myself, writing more. And so that's the thing that you give up on. I mean, I try and spend time with the family, but quite frankly, my best time is in front of the computer writing, but there are sacrifices to that. So I would say that people believe of me what they will, and I try not to disabuse them necessarily. I mean, for example, in my CV, I've never said in my CV I've worked part-time for the last 20 years, because the way I see it is that if I can do the job, I can do the job. It's no one's business whether I've been doing my job for 3 days a week or 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, a lot of women are quite hard on themselves. So when you say all those things that I'm doing, women who are hard on themselves will say, well, I couldn't do that, and what am I doing wrong? And I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, how's it being presented?
Yeah.
And I'm pull back and give more time. Sometimes I get overwhelmed, then I fall in a heap, and then I start again.
Well, the question was meant as a celebration of all the things that we do.
Sorry, thank you, Claudine.
But I also do believe that with everything, it's a question of priorities, and if it's something that you want, you'll prioritise it. And for all of those people out there in Zoom land who are my friends, I do love you. It's just that I hide in my little cave most of the day. So tell me about this new online book club that you've started. Is this one of the ways that you've been trying to work through the COVID-19 restrictions?
Yes, it is. So when the book was coming out, as I said, the COVID-19 was ramping up and everything was locking down. The book had been really well curated. So I loved the cover. The editing was done really beautifully by the editors, 3 editors at Allen and Unwin, Rebecca Stafford doing the structural edit, and it was great. And I just thought, I don't want to lose this opportunity to promote this book. I had a lot of festivals that I've been invited to. I had a lot of events. Everything was right, and then it seemed like everything might be wrong. Yeah. And like for all those people out there who are writing, and for you, Claudine, it is hard to get a book published. It's a difficult industry. There's a lot of luck involved. Obviously, I'm hoping there's skill as well, but it's hard work, and you only get a shot at it every couple of years, unless you're a really quick writer like Candace Fox, who gets one every year. So this was my chance. This was the only time I was going to get to do it. And so what I ended up doing was working hard with my publicist, Laura Benson, who's been magnificent, and also with a woman called Nalia, who does help me with social media. And the idea was, okay, so you're out there, how are you going to communicate with your readers? How are you going to communicate with your audience when what I'm used to is being on a stage in front of people and then signing books and getting to know people, which I really like. How do you do it? And so you do it through podcasts, Claudine, and through these sort of interviews. And I thought, well, maybe a book club. Maybe I'll just, once I can work my way around Zoom. And so every Thursday at 8 o'clock to 8:30, I have a book club called Thursday Book Club with Suzanne, which is me. And it's quick. I talk a bit about my week. I'm reasonably linked in with the literary community, so I talk about what awards have come up, what's on offer online, what grants there are. And then I recommend a book that I've read and then hand over to everybody who's attended. Every now and then, at least we've had one book club where it's a nothing but spoilers book club, where I talk about all the secrets and the deceptions, which is only for people who are. I'll have another one of those, I think, on the 21st of June. But it's I think there's a bit of a not a need so much, but I think people like something quick and regular without any pressure, that's relaxed.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, I'll be joining as soon as I can.
Oh, it'll be fabulous. So I think I probably should say, so I think if you go to my Facebook page, there's a sign up link for the newsletter, and that will give you the details into the book club. But tell me if I'm speaking too much, but what is interesting is that I think the need for community and for connection has been obvious, and I think this has been, I mean, the overall popularity of Zoom and of strangers or friends coming together to talk books has shown that being connected is important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Suzanne. So I think what we might do now is go to some questions. We've got a few questions to answer, so I'll read them out to you. So Pauline Wall wants to know, what happened to the Polish gendarme you mentioned you knew?
Now, how much can I say? So, okay, first of all, Pauline, I reckon you should come on, if you've read the book, I reckon you should come on the 21st of June or whatever the Thursday is on the, for this book club, so I can tell you everything. I'm a bit wary because I don't want to spoil the book. The book has a lot that is revealed as you continue, and I just don't want to spoil it. He, look, the long and the short is that he survived. He survived the war. How else he survived, I could probably chat to you about when I've only got people who've finished the book.
Yeah.
But yes, he survived. But he had a difficult time of it.
And
actually, one thing I can say is that he, no, I can't say that either.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Chris Fairbrother wants to know, what are you reading right now, or what is high on the to be read pile?
Okay, what am I reading right now? You know what I've just finished reading is a book called Exile Music by Jennifer Steele. She's an American writer. It's also Holocaust based, and but it's about a woman called Uli, who's a girl, a Viennese in Austria during the war, whose parents flee with her to Bolivia. That one. I'm also, and I'm going to be talking to Jennifer Steele about her previous book called The Ambassador's Wife, which I haven't read. I'm also reading Missing William Tyrrell by Caroline Overington, and I'll be interviewing her on the 16th of June for Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival. And so Caroline was the journalist who investigated the missing William Tyrrell, who was that little boy in a Spider-Man outfit who's never been found. Caroline's an excellent writer, very clear, harrowing, but a very informative book.
Fantastic, thanks for that. Shelley has a comment and a question. Fantastic interview, Claudine and Suzanne. Can't wait to read The Deceptions. Have you any advice for emerging writers trying to straddle both contemporary and historical timelines?
Yeah, do a chronology. have a really clear chronology. So it's the same with my legal work, actually. Whenever I get a new case, I start with a chronology. Whenever I try to write a new book, I start with a chronology. So just start from the earliest date, keep on going. My other tip is always, I'm a great proponent of the software package called Scrivener, which is, what it does, it divides your screen into a side panel where you can put your chapters, your characters, your scenes, your settings, and then you've got your work block, which you can also separate. I think when you're dealing with contemporary and historical timelines that intertwine, one piece of advice I was given was write the historical one first and then write the contemporary one second, or just write them separately. Yeah. What I tend to do is to label each chapter. So on Scrivener, have each chapter with a name to it, and do it that way. But I think chronology is a big start.
Thank you for that. And Chris Fairbrother has another question. You seem to have quite a high pressure career with big decisions to make. Do you write to escape?
Yes, I do. I think, okay, so like I said, the legal work I do at the moment is on the Civil and Administrative Tribunal, where I'm a senior member, and people who have been refused of working with children, check clearance, come to me to have that decision reviewed. And it's my job with another tribunal member. We sit together, different members, and to decide whether that person poses a real or an appreciable risk to the safety of children. It's a difficult job, you're right. I mean, it's really hard. The question of truth is difficult. The question of making findings as to what may or may not have happened, trying to establish what risk there may be to a child, as opposed to what evidence there may not be, is all very difficult. And I think partly the difficulty of those decisions and that job led to my writing of The Teacher's Secret. So The Teacher's Secret is a story of a deputy head called Terry, who finds himself forced into early retirement as a result of allegations made against him. And it's the story of a community and how the community deals with those allegations and day-to-day life. So I suppose that book was a way for me to say, this is difficult. This work is difficult, and you need to make decisions that have enormous ramifications for people's lives. Yeah. And you may not always be right. And I'm always very pleased that there's an appeal process to catch those decisions should they not be right. But so there was that, and I think with the deceptions, yes, I mean it's a song about truth, and my career is difficult decisions about making findings of truth. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much about writing is therapy in many ways. Certainly, you know, I've spoken to a number of authors who will say that their first book, whether it's published or you know, remains at the bottom of the drawer, is in many ways a therapy for them. You know, it's a way of working through an issue that they, you know, may have had in their, you know, life as a young child or something. So yes, so for many people who write, it is about escaping or dealing with issues.
I think the more we have quick life and quick computer work and quick social media, the less time we have to devote to deep thought, long form journalism, long form writing, and just spaces where you can deeply think about what's happening. And I think writing a novel, or writing particularly a novel, I think, because it's what I know, is a place for deep thought, even if you're not completely aware that's what you're doing. I mean, you're creating a world, you're making characters, but you are not responding quickly to a tweet or scrolling through Instagram. You are forced, if you can make yourself concentrate, which is not always easy, into deep thought.
Yes, indeed. One further question and comment. Well done, Claudine and Suzanne. I took away from your discussion the values of truth and power, which I think they are movable depending on life situations in the struggle for survival. Would you be moving on to write about current issues in relation to migration and refugees, given that you were involved in the Refugee Review Tribunal? That was a question from Nadia.
Thanks, Nadia. So in both the Teacher's Secret and the Deceptions, part of that interest in issues of refugee law and fleeing or asylum seeking come to the fore. So there's a character called Rebecca in The Teacher's Secret who's come from an unnamed African country, which I envisaged or imagined to be Zimbabwe. And in the Deceptions, there's a character called Amir who is Iranian, and we find out his story later. So it was a while ago that I was on the Refugee Review Tribunal, but it made an enormous impression on my life. The power that I was given to make decisions about people's right to asylum and migration status was enormous, and I was quite young at the time. And I think I was most taken aback, I think, or at least most affected by leaders who are clearly leaders in their community, who are coming before me, a young white woman, with their stories of why they should be granted asylum. And one man said, when I asked him, you know, is there anything you'd like to say at the end, which I always would. And rather than saying, please give this to me or thank you very much, he said, you have been charged with this responsibility and I charge you to do it well. And he was, for me, a great leader, and it was a slate of luck, or so it was just a fate that I was in judgment over him and he was coming to me. So it was those elements of the tribunal and this tribunal now that continue to affect me, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. We've still got a little bit of time, so I thought I might just ask, one more question. I know this is probably a question a lot of people ask you, but did you always want to be a writer?
I always really, really liked writing. I always, I can remember from year 2 or year 3, I had a fantastic teacher, Mr. Sheridan, who let me write as long as I liked and didn't curtail me. And I think, as you were saying, but I think before the writing came the reading. And there was less choice when I was younger. I mean, there was less screen choice. So if you wanted to escape into anything imaginary, a book was your option and not much more, really. So I think, I think Enid Blyton comes under attack to some extent now, but she certainly created a world for me that that gave me the confidence to think I could create my own.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we probably have run out of time, and Suzanne, thank you so very much for allowing me to chat with you tonight at this beautiful event. It's been a delight to learn about your beautiful new book and your research processes and your journey. Thank you again.
And thank you, Claudine. Can I just say, because often I'm in your seat where I'm interviewing, it's a really hard job. There's so much work. And sort of managing a conversation as seamlessly as you have, it's been the easiest thing being me here, just answering questions about me. So congratulations on your podcast, and I'd encourage all the listeners to listen in to Talking Aussie Books, and thank you for your time. And thank you to Christine and to Sandy for having me today. I've Malabar Library and Randwick Library and Bowen Library have a very dear place in my heart.
We're so happy to have had you.